Welcome back to our channel. If you enjoy rural stories, like and subscribe for more. And tell us in the comments what time it is and where you're watching from.
On the morning of June 14, 1983, Raymond Miller stood in the front lot of Bachman, New Holland, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. He was 41 years old. His oldest son, David, was 17 and waiting in the truck. Raymond had driven there with a check for $8,400, money he'd saved across 3 years by not replacing the barn roof, not paving the lane, not taking his wife to her sister's wedding in Ohio. He wasn't there to buy a new milking system. He was there to buy a New Holland 315 square baler, used, 7 years old, still blue, still solid. David didn't ask why. He already knew. The dairy herd wasn't growing. Milk prices were flat. The bank had started sending letters with phrases like revised terms and adjusted interest. Raymond had decided that survival meant doing more than one thing. Custom baling wasn't glamorous, but it was cash. Farmers paid in June. Farmers paid in July. And if you showed up on time and didn't break down, they called you back next year. Raymond signed the papers in the dealer's office. A man named Carl Bachman shook his hand and said the baler had been owned by a man in Berks County who'd gotten too old to run it. Raymond nodded. He didn't care who owned it before. He cared that it worked. Carl walked them out to the lot and helped Raymond hitch the baler to the truck. David stood beside the fender, hands in his pockets, watching his father check the knotters, the plunger, the tension arms. Raymond didn't say much. He ran his hand along the baled chute like he was checking a horse's legs. Then he climbed into the truck and drove home. The farm was 127 acres, 60 head of Holsteins, a milking parlor his grandfather had built in 1952. The house was white clapboard with a slate roof that leaked in 2 places. Raymond's father had died in 1978. His mother still lived in the back bedroom, but she didn't come downstairs much anymore. Raymond's wife, Barbara, managed the house and the bookkeeping. David was the oldest of 3 children. His sister, Emily, was 14. His brother, Nathan, was 11. Raymond had always assumed David would take over the dairy. That assumption had never been spoken aloud, but it sat in the air like dust. The baler arrived on a Tuesday. Raymond parked it in the machine shed beside the hay wagon and spent the next 2 days greasing zerks, replacing belts, and adjusting the pickup teeth. David helped when he was told to. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. His father's silence had a shape to it, focused, deliberate, a little bit grim. On Thursday evening, Raymond called a neighbor named Eugene Stoltzfus and told him he was taking baling jobs. Eugene said he had 18 acres of second cutting coming off the following week. Raymond said he'd be there. That first summer, Raymond baled 240 acres for 9 different farmers. He charged 12 cents a bale. David drove the truck and stacked. Raymond ran the baler and kept count. They worked from dawn until the dew came back. Some days they baled until 10 at night under truck headlights. The work was repetitive and loud. The baler clattered. The engine roared. Dust coated their skin and filled their lungs. Raymond didn't complain. David didn't either. By August, Raymond had made $3,100. He put it in an envelope and deposited it at the bank the same day he made the September mortgage payment. Barbara didn't say much about the baling work, but she noticed things. Raymond came home later. He smelled like diesel and dry grass. His hands were cracked and his knuckles bled from handling twine. He was losing weight. One night in early September, she asked him if the baling income was worth it. He said it was the only reason they weren't behind. She nodded. She didn't ask again. David turned 18 in October. He graduated high school the following spring. Raymond assumed he'd stay on the farm full time. David assumed the same thing. There was no conversation about college, no discussion of alternatives. The morning after graduation, David started milking at 4:30 a.m., same as always. By June, he was running the baler while Raymond drove the truck. The reversal happened without ceremony. Raymond's back had started bothering him. Lifting bales all day made it worse. David was younger, stronger. It made sense. That summer, they baled 290 acres. The following summer, 340. By 1987, Raymond had a waiting list. Farmers liked reliability. They liked the fact that Raymond showed up when he said he would and didn't leave half bales in the field. David ran the baler now. Raymond handled the schedule, the billing, the equipment maintenance. Nathan, the youngest son, helped with the dairy herd when he wasn't in school. Emily had left for nursing school in Harrisburg. She came home on holidays, but the farm didn't pull at her the way it pulled at her brothers. The dairy operation stayed small. Raymond never expanded the herd. He never modernized the milking parlor. The barn roof still leaked. The lane was still gravel. Barbara kept the books and noticed that the custom baling income now made up 40% of what kept them afloat. She also noticed that David had stopped talking about anything except work. He was 22 years old. He didn't date. He didn't go into town. He worked. In 1989, Raymond had a conversation with a man named Merle Kaufman at the feed mill. Merle ran a much larger operation, 200 head, new equipment, hired men. Merle asked Raymond why he didn't just sell the dairy herd and go full-time into custom work. Raymond said he didn't trust putting all his weight on one leg. Merle said that was smart. But later, driving home, Raymond wondered if it was smart or just scared. That same year, David met a woman named Sarah Byler at a church social. She was the daughter of a farmer in Chester County. They saw each other on Sundays. By winter, they were talking about marriage. Sarah's father asked David what his plans were. David said he worked with his father. Sarah's father asked if the farm could support 2 families. David said he didn't know yet. The engagement didn't happen. Sarah stopped coming to the socials. By spring, David heard she was seeing someone else. He didn't mention it to anyone. Raymond noticed that David had gotten quieter. He worked the same hours, did the same tasks, but there was a flatness to him now. Barbara mentioned it one night after David had gone to bed. She said he seemed lonely. Raymond said he was 23 and there was time. Barbara said time didn't fix loneliness. Raymond didn't respond. By 1991, the custom baling work had grown to the point where Raymond and David were baling nearly 500 acres every summer. Raymond bought a second baler, another New Holland, a 316 model, newer, faster. Nathan started running it on weekends when he wasn't working the dairy. The equipment was reliable, but the work was relentless. Haying season ran from late May through early September, and if the weather was good, they didn't stop. If the weather was bad, they waited, and the waiting made everything tighter. David turned 26 in 1992. He was leaner than he'd been in high school. His face had hardened in a way that made him look older than he was. He didn't talk much. He worked. He milked in the mornings, baled in the afternoons, did maintenance at night. On Sundays, he went to church and then came home. Sarah Baylor married a man from her own church district that fall. David didn't go to the wedding. He spent that Saturday baling a job for a farmer in Leola who needed it done before rain moved in. Raymond's back got worse. By 1993, he couldn't run a baler for more than an hour without needing to sit down. He started letting David and Nathan handle most of the baling jobs while he managed the schedule and handled repairs. Barbara noticed that Raymond had stopped smiling. He was 51 years old and moved like a man in his 60s. She asked him once if he'd thought about slowing down. He said slowing down meant losing customers. Losing customers meant losing income. Losing income meant losing the farm. She didn't ask again. In 1994, there was a drought. The first cutting was thin, the second cutting barely happened. Custom baling income dropped by 30%. Raymond took out a short-term loan to cover the gap. He didn't tell Barbara until after he'd signed the papers. When she found out, she asked him why he hadn't discussed it with her. He said because there wasn't a choice. She asked what would happen if next year was the same. He said it wouldn't be. She asked how he knew. He didn't answer. The following year was better. Average rainfall, good hay. David and Nathan baled 480 acres. Raymond paid off the short-term loan in October, but the close call stayed with him. He started watching the weather differently. He started watching David differently too. In 1995, Nathan graduated high school. He told Raymond he wanted to work construction. Raymond said the farm needed him. Nathan said he didn't want to spend his life baling hay for other people. Raymond said that was fine, but if Nathan left, David would be doing it alone. Nathan looked at his brother. David was standing by the barn door, 30 feet away, grease on his hands, waiting. Nathan stayed. The summer of 1996 was hot. June hit 94 degrees. July was worse. The hay dried fast, which was good for baling, but it also meant long days in full sun with no shade. David ran the older baler. Nathan ran the newer one. Raymond drove the truck and stacked when he could. By mid-July, they were baling 6 days a week. Raymond told them to drink water. David and Nathan both did, but the heat didn't care. One afternoon in late July, Nathan told David he couldn't do this anymore. They were unloading bales into a barn near Intercourse. The temperature was 97 degrees. The barn had no ventilation. Nathan stopped halfway through the load and sat down on a bale. He said he felt like he was disappearing. David didn't argue. He said he understood. He said if Nathan needed to leave, he should leave. Nathan asked what David would do. David said he'd figure it out. 2 weeks later, Nathan moved to a job site in York. He called home once a week. Raymond didn't talk about it. Barbara asked David if he was angry at his brother. David said no. She asked if he was scared. David said he didn't have time to be scared. Now it was just David. The summer of 1997, David baled 520 acres alone. Raymond helped when he could, but his back made it impossible to do much more than drive and count bales. David ran both balers depending on the job. He worked from sunrise to dark. He lost 15 pounds between June and August. Barbara watched him come home at night, eat in silence, and go to bed. She asked Raymond if this was sustainable. Raymond said David was strong. Barbara said that wasn't what she asked. Raymond said it was the only answer he had. In 1998, milk prices dropped. The dairy herd barely broke even. The custom baling income was now the only thing keeping the farm above water. Raymond refinanced the mortgage. The bank approved it, but the terms were tighter. Barbara signed the papers and put them in the filing cabinet without saying anything. That night, she asked Raymond what the plan was if David got hurt. Raymond said David was careful. She said careful wasn't the same as safe. Raymond said he knew that. She asked what would happen if something went wrong. Raymond said he didn't know. She said that was the problem. David turned 32 in 1998. He looked older. His hair was starting to thin. His shoulders were broad, but his face was gaunt. He didn't talk about leaving. He didn't talk about the future. He worked. On Sundays, he sat in the back of the church and left as soon as the service ended. A woman named Ruth Esch tried talking to him once after services. She was a widow, 40 years old, with 2 children. She asked David if he'd like to come to dinner sometime. David said he appreciated it, but he didn't have much time. Ruth said she understood. She didn't ask again. In 1999, Emily came home for Thanksgiving. She'd been working as a nurse in Harrisburg for 6 years. She barely recognized David. She pulled her mother aside and asked what was wrong with him. Barbara said he was tired. Emily said he looked like he was dying. Barbara said he was doing what needed to be done. Emily asked if anyone had considered that maybe what needed to be done was impossible. Barbara didn't answer. In 2000, Raymond had a health scare. Chest pains. The doctor said it was stress and inflammation, not a heart attack, but he needed to rest. Raymond rested for 2 weeks. David ran everything. The dairy, the baling, the repairs, the billing. When Raymond came back, he was quieter. He started talking about maybe selling the herd. Barbara said that might be smart. Raymond didn't make a decision. He couldn't. Selling the herd meant admitting the custom baling was all they had, and the custom baling only worked because David ran it. And David was 54 years old in his father's eyes, even though he was only 34. The summer of 2001 was the wettest in 20 years. Haying season stretched into October. Farmers were desperate. David worked through rain delays and equipment breakdowns. He baled in mud. He baled in fog. The older baler started missing bales. David spent 3 nights in the machine shed rebuilding the plunger. He didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night for 2 months. One night in September, he came home and told his mother he didn't know how much longer he could keep going. Barbara asked if he wanted to stop. David said he didn't know what else he'd do. She asked if he'd ever thought about it. He said no. She said maybe he should. He went to bed. He didn't bring it up again. By 2003, Raymond was 61. He'd stopped doing any physical labor. He managed the schedule and handled the money, but David did everything else. The dairy herd was down to 40 head. Milk prices were still low. The custom baling was the engine. David was the engine. Barbara started keeping a journal. She didn't write much, just observations. One entry from July 2003 said, "David came home today and didn't eat, just went to bed. I think he's given up on everything except work." That winter, Barbara asked Raymond what would happen if David got hurt. Raymond said David was careful. Barbara said that was the third time he'd said that in 5 years, and it hadn't become more true. Raymond asked what she wanted him to do. She said she wanted him to see what was happening. Raymond said he saw it. She asked if he was going to do anything about it. He said there was nothing to do. She asked if that was true or if he just didn't want to admit he'd made a mistake. Raymond didn't answer. They didn't talk about it again. The spring of 2004 was dry. By May, the first cutting was ready early. David started baling the second week of the month. The heat came early too. June was brutal. 90-degree days. No rain. The hay was perfect for baling, but the heat was suffocating. David worked alone. He drank water from a jug he kept on the baler. He wore a hat. He kept moving. Raymond asked him once if he wanted to hire help. David said they couldn't afford it. Raymond said maybe they could figure something out. David said there was nothing to figure out. The work needed to be done. He'd do it. One afternoon in mid-June, a farmer named Levi Zook called and said he had 30 acres down and needed it baled by the weekend. David said he'd be there. Raymond asked if he needed help. David said he was fine. He loaded the baler onto the trailer and drove to Zook's farm on Thursday morning. The field was flat and open, no trees, no shade. David started baling at 7 in the morning. By noon, the temperature was 96 degrees. He finished the first 15 acres by 2 in the afternoon. He stopped long enough to drink water and check the baler. Then he started again. By 4 o'clock, he'd baled 22 acres. The heat was staggering. The air shimmered. David's shirt was soaked through. He kept going. He had 8 acres left. He wanted to finish before dark. At 5:30, the baler jammed. David shut it down and climbed off to clear the plunger. He knelt in the dirt and pulled out a wad of compacted hay. His hands were shaking. He stood up, wiped his face, and climbed back onto the baler. He started it again. He baled 3 more acres. At 6:45, David stopped the baler in the middle of the field. He sat down on the operator's platform. Then he leaned forward and didn't get back up. Levi Zook found him at 7:20. The baler was still idling. David was slumped over the controls. Levi shut off the engine and called for help. The ambulance arrived 30 minutes later. David was unconscious. His core temperature was 106 degrees. They transported him to Lancaster General Hospital. Raymond and Barbara arrived just after 9 o'clock. A doctor told them David had suffered heat stroke. Severe. His kidneys were failing. They were doing everything they could. Raymond sat in a plastic chair in the waiting room and stared at the floor. Barbara held his hand. Neither of them spoke. David died at 3:17 a.m. on June 18, 2004. He was 38 years old. The funeral was held at the church on a Tuesday. The building was full. Farmers, neighbors, people David had baled for, people who had known him since he was a boy. Raymond sat in the front row beside Barbara and Nathan. Emily sat on the other side of her mother. Raymond didn't cry. He sat very still and looked at the coffin. A man named Eli Byler spoke. He said David had been a hard worker. He said David had been dependable. He said the community had lost a good man. Raymond heard the words, but didn't process them. All he could think about was the baler still sitting in Levi Zook's field. After the burial, people came back to the farm. They brought food. They said kind things. Raymond shook hands and nodded. He didn't remember any of it later. Barbara stood in the kitchen and received casseroles and pies and didn't know where to put them. Emily helped. Nathan stood outside by the machine shed and smoked a cigarette. He hadn't smoked in 3 years. He didn't care. The following week, Raymond went to Levi Zook's farm and brought the baler home. Levi helped him load it. Levi said he was sorry. Raymond said he knew. Levi said if Raymond needed anything to call. Raymond nodded. He drove the baler back to his own farm and parked it in the machine shed. He didn't cover it. He just left it there. 2 days later, Raymond sold the dairy herd, all 40 head. He called the auction house and had them picked up on a Thursday. He didn't tell anyone why. Barbara didn't ask. She watched the trucks pull away and felt a strange kind of relief. Not happiness, just the absence of something that had been weighing her down for 20 years. Raymond kept the New Holland baler. That summer, Raymond tried to run baling jobs himself. He managed 2. His back gave out. He couldn't lift bales. He couldn't sit on the baler for more than an hour. He called his customers and told them he couldn't take any more jobs. Most of them understood. A few were frustrated. One man said he'd counted on Raymond for 15 years. Raymond said he was sorry. The man said sorry didn't help. Raymond hung up. In the fall, Nathan came home and asked his father what he was going to do. Raymond said he didn't know. Nathan asked if he was going to sell the farm. Raymond said he didn't know that either. Nathan said he couldn't come back and run it. He had a life in York, a fiancée, a job. Raymond said he understood. Nathan asked if his father blamed him for leaving. Raymond said no. Nathan asked if he blamed him for David. Raymond didn't answer. Nathan left 2 hours later. He didn't come back for 8 months. Barbara started sleeping in the guest room, not because she was angry, because Raymond would wake up in the middle of the night and walk through the house. Sometimes he'd go out to the machine shed and stand in front of the baler. She'd find him there in the morning, sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at the machine. She asked him once what he was thinking about. He said he was thinking about the day he bought it. She asked if he regretted it. He said he regretted everything. In 2006, Raymond put the farm up for sale. A developer bought it for $340,000, the house, the barn, the 127 acres. The sale closed in April. Raymond and Barbara moved into a small ranch house outside Lidditz. Raymond kept the baler. He stored it in a rented shed 2 miles from the new house. Barbara asked him why he kept it. He said he didn't know. She asked if he was ever going to use it again. He said no. She asked if he was going to sell it. He said no. She asked what the point was. He said there wasn't a point. She stopped asking. In 2008, Nathan got married. Raymond and Barbara attended the wedding. It was held at a hotel in York. Nathan introduced his father to people as a retired farmer. Raymond nodded and didn't correct him. During the reception, Nathan's new wife asked Raymond what he'd farmed. Raymond said dairy and hay. She said that sounded nice. Raymond excused himself and went outside. Barbara found him 20 minutes later sitting in the parking lot. She asked if he was all right. He said he was fine. They drove home in silence. In 2011, Barbara was diagnosed with cancer. Ovarian. Stage 3. She fought it for 2 years. Chemo, radiation, surgery. She lost her hair. She lost weight. She didn't lose her resolve. Raymond took care of her. He cooked. He cleaned. He drove her to appointments. He sat with her during treatments. In the evening, she'd ask him to talk to her. He didn't know what to say. She said anything was fine. He told her about the farm, about his father, about the early years when things seemed possible. He didn't talk about David. She didn't ask him to. Barbara died in October 2013. Raymond was 71. The funeral was small. Nathan came. Emily came, a few people from church. Raymond stood by the grave and watched them lower the casket. He thought about the fact that he'd now buried a son and a wife, and he was still here. He didn't know if that was a blessing or a punishment. Emily moved back to Pennsylvania to help him. She found him one afternoon sitting in the shed with the baler. She asked what he was doing. He said he was just looking. She asked if he wanted to sell it. He said no. She asked why not. He said because it was the last thing he had that connected him to David. She said David wasn't in the baler. Raymond said he knew that. She asked what he was looking for then. He didn't answer. In 2015, a man named Joshua Lapp called Raymond. Joshua had bought the old Miller farm from the developer. He was turning it back into a working farm. He'd heard Raymond used to do custom baling. He asked if Raymond still had the equipment. Raymond said he did. Joshua asked if he'd be willing to sell the baler. Raymond said no. Joshua asked why. Raymond didn't answer. Joshua said if Raymond ever changed his mind, to give him a call. Raymond hung up. Emily asked who it was. Raymond said nobody. In 2017, Raymond had a stroke, a small one. Emily moved him into her house. He recovered most of his mobility, but his speech was slower. He stopped driving. Emily asked him again about the baler. She said the rental on the shed was $150 a month, and he hadn't used the machine in over a decade. She said it didn't make sense. Raymond said it didn't have to make sense. She asked what she was supposed to do with it when he was gone. He said that was her decision. She didn't bring it up again. In 2019, Emily drove Raymond to the shed. She unlocked the door and helped him inside. The baler was still there, covered in dust. The tires were flat. The paint was faded. Raymond stood in front of it for a long time. Emily asked what he was thinking. He said he was thinking about David. She asked if keeping the baler helped him remember. He said no. She asked if it made him feel better. He said no. She asked why he kept it. He said because it was the reason David was gone and selling it wouldn't bring him back and keeping it was the only punishment he had left. Emily didn't say anything. She helped her father back to the car. They drove home. That night, she called Nathan. She told him what their father had said. Nathan was quiet for a long time. Then he said he'd always known. She asked what he meant. He said he'd always known their father blamed himself. She asked if Nathan blamed him. Nathan said he didn't know. She asked if he blamed the baler. Nathan said the baler was just a machine. She said their father didn't see it that way. Nathan said their father hadn't seen anything clearly since 2004. In 2021, Raymond turned 79. He stopped going to the shed. Emily paid the rental fee every month and didn't bring it up. In the spring, a man called asking about the baler. Emily told him it wasn't for sale. The man offered $2,500. Emily said no. The man said it was just sitting there. Emily said she knew. The man said that was a waste. Emily said a lot of things were a waste. The man hung up. Raymond died in his sleep on November 3rd, 2022. He was 80 years old. Emily found him in the morning. He looked peaceful. She called Nathan. She called the funeral home. She sat in the kitchen for an hour before she did anything else. The funeral was small. Nathan came, a few people from church. Raymond was buried beside Barbara and David in the cemetery outside Strasbourg. The pastor said Raymond had lived a long life. Emily didn't contradict him. She didn't think length was the right measure. After the funeral, Emily went to the shed. She stood in front of the baler for a long time. Then she called Joshua Lapp. She told him the baler was available if he still wanted it. Joshua said he'd be there the next day. He arrived with a trailer. Emily helped him load the machine. Joshua asked if it still ran. Emily said she didn't know. Joshua said he'd get it running. He said it was a good baler. New Holland built them to last. Emily nodded. She didn't tell him the rest. She figured the machine had carried enough already. Joshua hauled the baler back to the old Miller farm. He spent 2 weeks working on it. Replaced the belts, greased the fittings, changed the fluids, adjusted the knotters. On a Saturday morning in early December, he fired it up. The engine turned over on the second try. The baler ran smooth. Joshua smiled. He shut it off and called his son over. He said this was a real New Holland, built to last. His son asked how old it was. Joshua said close to 40 years. His son asked if it was worth fixing. Joshua said some things were worth more than their age. The following summer, Joshua baled 180 acres with it. The baler never missed. He told people it was the best machine he'd ever owned.